Hey everybody, Lincoln here with Eastwood Guitars. At Eastwood, we make instruments that appeal both to the seasoned professional musician and the beginner. So some people might be buying and maintaining their first instrument. And for that reason, a question that we often get are customers looking for a good resource of how to change strings on their instrument. Today, I'm going to be running through just that. I've got my handy dandy string changing toolkit here with everything that I'll need, as well as the instrument in question, my Sidejack Pro Deluxe, my first Eastwood instrument. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. The first step in any string change is to first remove the old strings. There are a few ways of doing this. Some people like to just snip them off. I like to relieve the weight gradually by taking a little bit of pressure off of each string before unwinding them completely. The tool that I'm using here is a standard string winder tool that you can find at any guitar shop or order online. This one has a built-in string snip, so it comes in handy for a few different jobs. Now that the pressure's off, I'm gonna unwind these strings the rest of the way. A lot of times they'll come right off. That one just popped right off. Other times, once they are a little slack, you can kind of pull that wind over the rest of the post and it'll just slip right out. Now that all of my strings are loose from the peg head, these curly bits will not slide back through the end piece here. So the next step is to use my cutter that I have in the back of my string winder and shear these off. So you might have just noticed my bridge comes loose. That just floats on the post there and is held down by string tension. So if that comes off, no biggie, we'll just get that out of the way. If you're afraid of those smaller strings getting away from you, as I am sometimes, I just like to roll my strings up so they can be confined in one area. The smaller pieces will take some keeping track of. Now that I have my strings off, I'm going to give this guitar a little bit of a cleaning. So you can see there's just a little bit of dust and grime that builds up under the strings from playing. So another tool that I have in my toolkit are polish cloths and some cleaner. I'll take care of that right away. Now that everything's cleaned up, it's time to look at our new set of strings. Right now, I just have a set of PRS signature guitar strings. They are gauges 10 to 46, so nice medium gauge there, not too light, not too heavy. I like to start by threading all 6 strings through the tailpiece and just hang them out over here to the side at first. That way you have everything in order and can start left to right as you start winding on the peg heads. All right, time out, Eastwood fans. You might be asking, what if I have a different style of bridge or tailpiece? How does that change my process at all? All string changes will follow the same simple format of stringing through your tailpiece, but you might have one that looks a lot different. For example, here is my Eastwood Surfcaster that has an S-style bridge with steel saddles. This is a little unique because you might say, well, where do the strings string from? As you take the strings off and trim the strings, they'll fall right out of the back through the tremolo block here. When you're ready to string the strings, you just thread them through the tremolo block and thread the needle so they come out right between each one of your saddles. All right, Time in. Now that we've gotten all of our strings threaded through the tailpiece, I'm going to get the lower 5 out of the way so we can focus just on this low E string for our first wind. So the first step, I measure with the string to the point just at the second of those peg heads. So one peg head past the one that you're going to be winding this on. So I'm going to take my fingernail at where that second peg head meets and just bend it to make a mark. Once I've got my mark made, I can thread it through the first peg head. Might take a few tries to thread that needle, but with a little practice, it'll be like second nature. When I have this threaded through, I get that mark that I had bent just past the peg head. At this point, I take the excess string, loop it under, then over, and I pull it tight. I'm holding down on the string to maintain tension going in this direction. When I have that tension, I'm lifting up with this finger while holding it down near the peg head with this finger. When I've got that tension established, I'm going to take my winder and make sure that it's winding from the inside out to the edge of the peg head. You want all of your winds going in the direction of inside out. And if you're holding down the string here and keeping tension here, that should cause the string to wind down the peg head in a nice even laying spiral. It shouldn't overlap. Since we measured with that mark, there won't be too much excess that it overlaps with other winds of the string. And you want to also double check that as you're tightening it up, that you have the string properly seated on your saddle at the bridge. And once you have enough tension to make a noise, that's about all you need. At this point, I go ahead and clip off about a ½ centimeter past where that excess starts. And this is junk. I'll throw that in my trash pile. So you repeat that process that I just did for the low E string with the next two on the same side, so the A and the D strings. Let's do that. As you can see from our first 3 string winds, all of those strings are going from the inside of the peg head and spiraling towards the outside of the headstock. All of our string winds are not overlapping, but they're neatly stacked going up the peg head. Now that the 3 on the bass side of the headstock are done, with a 3-2-a-side headstock, I like to start from the outside and work in. So now that we've done the 3 on the bass side, we're going to do the 3 on the treble side. And if we're working from the outside of the headstock in, I would want to start with my high E string this time and get those 2 excess out of the way. This makes it a little easier because if you have those 2 strings that go past done first, it's really hard to get a finger in there and hold tension when you're winding. This way, I have easy access to every single one of the strings as I'm winding them. Once again, since the string's a little thinner, I can give this a little bit more room, a little bit more excess string. So I'm going to measure with the high E about a peg head distance and a half past this peg that I'm winding on. So I'm going to mark it here. Once again, I take my string, I make a nice little bend to make a mark. That's a harder one to see. And once again, I'm using one finger to keep the string held down, and another finger, my thumb here, I'm using to keep the tension on the string. So the goal is to have that string pulling back towards the bridge the whole time that I'm winding it. There are several ways of doing this. This is the way that I am just most comfortable keeping tension. You might find your own way that works well for you, and that's great. There's no right or wrong as long as you keep that tension low on the post and the tension back in the direction of the bridge. So as I wind it, since I've got this finger holding the string down, it's winding nice and neatly up the peg head. That's enough tension there to go ahead and trim the excess. We're not tuning this up to pitch just yet. We'll do that gradually here once we have all the strings on with a little bit of tension on. Now that the strings are on and have tension and trimmed at the headstock, we can start tuning up to pitch. If you've already tuned your E string and tune each string in succession, you'll notice that when you go back to the E string, you'll probably be way out of tune. It's because the increasing pressures on the other strings take pressure off of that first string. So you'll have to go back and start at the beginning and tune each string several times up to pitch until you get them into a standard tuning. Our instrument is tuned with the new strings, but if you're new to new strings, you might wonder, why does it go out of tune so quickly if I just changed the strings? Over time, maybe the next several minutes of you playing, maybe the next hour of you playing, it could gradually stretch the strings. They'd lose tension, causing you to go out of tune. To help with this, after I put my strings on, I like to give them a good stretch. Nothing too extreme that you might break a string and then be out the money of a new set of strings. So you don't want to break any strings, but I just like to give my strings a good stretch. Back and forth. First down here where you're strumming. Next, back here where you're bending. It gives a good stretch point to all of these strings in multiple locations. And the fun thing that I like to see is how far out of tune did this stretch just cause these strings to go. Let's see, for example, let's take the low E string that was just tuned perfectly a second ago. Now after a good stretch, it is a little sharp of a D. So that is a full step flat of where it was. So we'll go ahead and tune that back up. And there you have it. We've taken the necessary steps to make sure that your instrument is not only sounding its best, but feeling its best. Enjoy your playing. Join us next time here at Eastwood Guitars. I've been Lincoln Smith. Thanks for joining.